Before we get started with the interview with Andy Reid, let me first explain and apologize for the weird clicking sounds at the beginning of this interview that sound like someone typing rather loudly. Turns out it was Dan Williams' cat causing a ruckus on the other side of the Zoom call. It's a little annoying, but it's also funny. Enjoy the laugh. Also, as always, thanks for listening to Tape Noise Podcasts. So what's going on with you, Andy?
Well, I don't know if you've seen the news, but Michigan, the Midland area of Michigan, had two dams collapse yesterday during the day. And two giant lakes, like sporting lakes, flooded into the city of Midland.
Oh, no.
And Sanford. And they said about, 11,000 right now are displaced. Nobody's been reported, no deaths or injuries reported yet, but I that's 20 minutes away from me. So, and what's going to happen is all that water flows into the Tittabawassee River, and then eventually it comes into the Saginaw River, which is a half a mile from my house. We got tons of rain this past week, so I'm kind of prepping for this water coming through where our river is already kind of crested, but they think most of it's going to spill off and we should be okay. But my studio is in my basement, so I've spent the last, 12 hours unhooking everything and moving it upstairs into a spot where I won't lose all my equipment.
Oh, man.
Well, let me ask you this, Andy. Do we need to reschedule?
No, I'm great. No, I'm good, guys. I'm all set. Actually, I was like, this is actually perfect timing for me to kind of get my head away from all of this, because I have a lot of friends that are affected, and I kind of did my check-ins and made sure everybody was okay. I have a generator in case anybody needed to use it, that kind of stuff. So everyone I know is evacuated and in good shape. I did have a buddy who has a studio, and he lost all of his equipment. So I'm going to try to figure out to help him out and in the future and stuff. So it's the Tri-Cities is the area I live in, and most of the people I record are from this Tri-City area, which is Midland, Saginaw, and Bay City. And I'm actually in Bay City. So it's.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep it straight, but
that's.
Do y'all hear that typing?
Yeah.
No.
What is that?
Is that either one of y'all?
No.
Ah.
But I thought it was one of you guys.
Uh-uh.
Are you guys
same? I thought.
You guys on video?
No.
Okay.
I wonder if there's something clicking over here in my house, and I'm not. Hold on, let me take off my headphones.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
you were
okay.
saying something seriously, very serious, and I'm over here like trying to not crack up because it's super loud with that typing.
Yeah, I heard it too. I didn't know what it was.
I don't know if it was a typing sound, but one of my cats was being a complete and total.
Yep, that's got to be it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
and here she is. Here she is.
I'm sorry, Andy. You're dealing with a flood and telling me something very, very serious over there, and I'm like trying to not crack up over here.
Oh no!
I'm like, what
fine.
is?
Andy, do you need a cat?
No, I have a dog. She's
Okay.
She's enough. She's enough. She's actually sitting underneath my desk right now, and she has gas, so it's not very fun where I'm sitting either. So, but at least you can't hear that.
No, it's
so
just an assault on the other senses.
I know exactly, but long story short,
anyway, so to our listeners, that was not typing. That was Dan's cat. So, all right. So back to being serious. I promise I wasn't trying to make light of that. I'm just over here like, does anybody hear that but me? Am I losing it? What's up? Okay.
I thought maybe someone was like dictating everything and keep taping it out as we talked, and I'm like, well, that's the whole point of recording it, isn't it?
We're not that awesome.
No, I didn't tell you guys. I hired a court stenographer.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what it sounds like. I'm like I couldn't be a judge or a lawyer because that would annoy me.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we're 5 minutes in, and I totally derailed us with that. Actually, it's Dan's cat, so I blame the cat. All right, so back to serious stuff. I heard on the news about the floods, but I've been stringing lights, moving bricks, and running electrical wiring for the past few days at a friend of mine's studio, and he's got a deck that he's built that's real nice, and I've been helping him with that. And so when I've not been up a ladder or underneath a deck running wires, I'm doing this. So I haven't turned on the TV in a few days, I guess is what I'm saying, to even really hear what's up. And that is a fear that we've had. Right. I don't know if you saw 2 years in a row, February of this year and last February, the year before, we had real bad floods. The year before, it was much worse. We had sandbags and all of that, and water almost got in the recording studio.
Oh, wow.
And that was, I had moved stuff up off the ground, and
it's scary.
Man, it was scary. And we've got Wilson Dam that we've kind of been like, man, what happens if that goes? Because the spillways, what is it, Dan? Like 1 point something million gallons per second or something?
I don't remember exactly what it was. I remember they said that at one point we had 4 Olympic swimming pools of water coming through the dam per second.
Wow.
At that point, I'm just like, that's a lot. And I don't even really, I mean, there's, 1.6 million, 1.7. I don't know that it matters anymore.
But the point is that water and sensitive recording equipment are not good friends.
No,
I'd say they're natural enemies at that point.
And to kind of like put this one in perspective for us is we had a flood in 1986 that was pretty huge in the same area, because the Saginaw River is a big piece of water. It's a big, strong piece of water. And if you look at like the map of Michigan, there's the bay, which is kind of out by the thumb area. If you look at it like a mitten, and I kind of live at the crack of the bay. So the flood of 86, they were calling it like the 100-year flood or whatever. And they're calling this one the 500-year flood. So it's like, it's going to destroy every record that the flood of 86 did.
Wow.
The main concern is like, this water is coming. It came through these dams and it's going into the Tittabawassee River. And that's basically the big river right now in Midland. It's just overflowed. It's like 35 feet or something stupid. And then all of that water basically comes around, and then the Tittabawassee meets the Saginaw River. And then the Saginaw River will basically flow past my house and out into the Saginaw Bay. And then it's out into the Great Lakes. So
Are you in any fear of your studio? I mean, you obviously being cautious because of moving stuff.
No, I mean, my studio's in my house. The only thing that I've heard today is that what's going to happen is potentially the sewers won't be able to kind of keep up with the amount of water. So there's some potential for sewer backup. I have a sump pump in my basement. My sewer vent is out in the front yard, which is kind of cool. So I have like an air vent there. So whenever my sewer does back up, it kind of like, there's crap in my yard, which is pretty gross, but it is what it is. At least it's in my yard and not in my basement.
And free fertilizer, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. My grass is super green there. I mean, honestly, like I have everything covered through like Music Pro insurance. So I have all my equipment in a separate policy. So it's like water damage, fire, some idiot throws a microphone in my studio. I have coverage on all that stuff. But as you guys know, over time, you grow to like your things and they become part of you, and you don't want to risk losing them. And I don't want to risk a claim and all of that stuff. So I'm just playing it a little extra safe. My studio needed a really, really thorough cleaning. So if anything, I'm just going to be able to put this back together and keep my cabling a little tighter and stuff like that. So with COVID and all that stuff too, it's just like, it's going to be good to at least best case scenario, and I don't get any water in, I'm going to be able to give this studio a head to toe kind of scrub down, and that'll be a good thing. So
that actually is good. I've luckily been able to stay pretty busy through all of it because I had worked on a few records and stayed in mix mode for the most part.
Cool.
Lately. But I've got that MCI console, and I moved it February before last, after the first big flood. I was at a point where I couldn't really stop working to be able to tear things down and move things out and move the console in and hook it up and have downtime. So the flood having had happened and the fact that it didn't get in the building enabled me to have grace from all of my clients to, hey, I'm taking this opportunity to move in this cool console. Things will be great. Just give me an extra week and your projects will be done. That was a good opportunity to be able to do that. And it kind of forced my hand, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
But so that totally sucks, man. I didn't really realize it's one of those things I haven't even watched TV much in the past few days.
It's honestly within the last 24 hours. So it's still kind of breaking news. And so, us being downriver, they said, the effects on Bay City will be Friday. But I mean, like I said, the effects on us are going to be minimal. I mean, I have friends out in Midland and stuff. So it's pretty heartbreaking, but I've been in the situation where I haven't been working. So my deal is that, my studio being in my home, I can't really risk with COVID kind of having people in my house and stuff like that. So I also have my mother is kind of ill. And so she needs to be able to see my daughter and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of laying low. Same thing, kind of mixing with the laptop, doing a couple mastering gigs. But I was lucky enough to kind of get on the unemployment train as soon as Michigan opens up for self-employed people. I mean, it's not as much as I would make if I was working, but it's definitely enough to kind of hold us over until it's safe to have people in and I can comfortably do that and still be able to visit my mom and stuff like that and not risk her getting it and stuff. So it's
right.
I'm kind of tiptoeing a little bit more than most people are at the moment. But when it comes to kind of stuff like this, it's always a family first thing. And thankfully, my clientele, I probably have about 15 to 20 records going right now between people, but they usually book like 1 or 2 dates a month and then come in and do like a song or two. And then they kind of make a record over a year and then that one gets released and then they start making a new one and stuff like that. So I don't ever really have like 1 or 2 weeks where people come in and just like track an album. I mean, it does happen, but very, very rarely. So most of my clientele, they're awesome. And they're like, yep, whatever you need, take as much time as you need, make sure you're, and at this point, they're all family because most of the people that I've worked with, they're on their 3rd or 4th albums. They're in no rush and they're super patient. And, we're all dealing with that right now. They don't want to risk getting anyone sick or getting sick as well. So it's kind of like, I think we're going to have this big feeling out pattern for a while now, especially when it comes to close quarter studio stuff. But
right.
I know everybody's kind of loosening the reins a little bit, which is cool to see people getting back to work. I just hope that everybody is able to stay safe and not, catch anything or spread anything. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've had, the home studio thing is a thing that's just kind of, well, especially in Nashville, even though it's illegal in Nashville,
right.
That's kind of the way you do things in Nashville. But, here in Muscle Shoals, I mean, there's not as many home studios. There are more studios, but
right. Yeah.
It's one of those things where I've tried to have my studio in my home.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan and I were actually talking about this prior to the interview, and he had some questions for sure about it. You have it in your basement, so you have a dedicated area to your house. Right. Mine was always an extra room in the house where you had to go through the house, and I found myself not getting any laundry done or anything around the house. The grass never got cut. Things that needed to be done just didn't get done.
Right.
And things in the studio didn't get done either. I would have all these edits and mixes. I would halfway do everything. And it would take me longer to get everything done because I didn't have a space to go to that was like, okay, I'm here, I'm doing the thing, I'm going home once I'm done. So I have I think it would be easier if it was a dedicated, like separate building from your house or being in a basement. I feel like that's its own workspace.
Yeah.
So, but while we're into that, I should mention that you are the owner of Reed Recording Company in Bay City, Michigan.
Yep.
And as we've mentioned, home recording studio. And you do full-time analog, digital, and all of that. So you have a lot of vintage gear.
Yep.
You have a lot of the new gear, and you use Pro Tools. I was looking on your gear list, and I remember you talking about using Studio One also, and would like to.
I tried it a little bit, but yeah.
Okay, well, on in the interview, speak into that, if you will. But let's lead into what it's like and what your thoughts are and how you navigate having a home recording studio.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that, like you said early on, was a little trickier, and you almost have to train yourself and kind of work on that, flex those muscles a little bit and be a little, the hardest part for me, especially when you're starting a business, is not leaving it. It was harder for me to walk away from the studio if someone called late at night and they needed something. I'd be like, okay, I'll do it right now. That kind of stuff. I wanted to make everybody happy. But over time, I've definitely learned how to manage my home time. And having a kid is perfect for that, because they really don't let you work if they're home. So I've definitely done a good job of keeping kind of a normal business hours. I typically work from 10 to 5 Monday through Saturday. And then that's it. People have been great about that. They've been awesome about coming in. And during those times, obviously right now is a different scenario, but usually my wife goes to work and my daughter goes to school. Nobody's home but me. So there's no distractions, which is fantastic. But the harder part for me was definitely turning off the studio brain in the evenings. But, having done this, I think this is my 14th year of kind of doing this as a full-time gig. It's definitely easier to turn it off now than it ever was. It's like someone calls and asks for a mix tweak. It's like, yeah, I'll do that in the morning. It's like I'm not even answering the phone.
And that is so hard. That is so hard. A lot of times I'll bring my laptop home and I'll be like, yeah, I'll do that. But that kind of goes into training your clients as well.
Well, they're your friends. They don't care if you wait a day or two, but you get in this frame of mind where such a service driven thing that, especially early on when you're so insecure about keeping people happy, you want to just hustle and do everything right then and there. And of course they appreciate it, but they're not going to be ticked off if you say, hey man, I got a session tomorrow. Let me try to do it tomorrow night. If not, a couple days in the morning, I'll take care of it. And everybody's like, okay, cool, great. Thanks. Nobody ever gets mad if you say, hey, I'll take care of this tomorrow or the day after, so.
Well, to speak into that, you're 100% correct in that I have a record I've been working with, Rhonda Ray specifically. So by the time this episode comes out and is published, hopefully her record will be maybe even out at that point. But we just finished tracking and I told her, I was like, look, can I have a few days to set this down and not think about it?
Yeah.
And come at it fresh and mix. I was like, I've been so head down in this for so long. I really feel like I'm going to do a better job. I usually do if I can step away. And she's like, oh, absolutely. You do whatever you need to do.
Yeah. So you lose perspective. You need a break. You need to, reset your ears. You need to reset your brain. That's super smart. I mean, and like I said, you're doing these things for the betterment of the music. And if they understand that you're taking these breaks and you're doing these things, it's for them. It's to make their records better. So
absolutely,
I think people are definitely more understanding, especially with technology, the way we have it now. It's like the way we're able to deliver stuff. It's like, so if you deliver a record and, they can put it up and online and it can be released in 3 days, on all the digital sites, it's like, that's kind of scary in the way that, people are in a little bit more of a hurry. But if they really, appreciate what you're doing and respect what you're doing and listen to your guidance and advice, they have no problems waiting to at least get the music part right, and then they can rush through the release as much as they want,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey Dan, so what were some of the questions you had about running the home studio in like today's music business?
Well, I guess I kind of wondered because it seems like, and I think anybody that's been in the music world for a very, for any amount of time at all understands that there is a difference between a home studio and somebody on the internet that has a MacBook and interface and some plugins and says they're a home studio. So
Right.
how hard is it to differentiate yourself and set yourself apart from, I hate to call them essentially pop-ups, but yeah,
Right.
pop-ups that don't have any kind of pedigree or experience or frankly, even the gear to call themselves a studio. Let's just be blunt.
No,
that makes me think of that meme that goes around of the Fisher Price microphone and keyboard, and it says, "I'm at the studio."
Oh yeah.
Have you seen that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've known some people like that.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. So when I kind of got into this, I've always been a songwriter and an artist kind of first. So the whole studio thing kind of started with just me kind of wanting to record my own stuff. And then when I'd release stuff, then I'd have some friends just kind of ask if I would record them and kind of, produce them a little bit. So as much as I want this to kind of be like a recording studio, I would say it's a little bit more of like a production house. So in a sense, when people want to record here, they know that as a producer, I'm going to bring a little bit to the music side of it as well as engineer and document it and all that. So then, it becomes more, and that's kind of why I wanted to keep my name in the studio title a little bit, So in a sense, they're kind of hiring me almost as like a musical director that can also like have decent microphones and record it in a nice way. So I think that putting out my own records with other bands and stuff has definitely helped me define my role as a producer and my musicality, and it kind of showcases my abilities on the instruments and stuff like that. Every single record that I've done is honestly been a referral from another album that I've recorded. So I think it just kind of snowballed into something that I didn't really know was going to happen. I loved doing this, and I thought, well, yeah, I'll help people with their records. And as much as I would rather be just an engineer and not a producer, I kind of am a producer and that engineers, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So
it absolutely makes sense because that's the role I play.
Yeah. So, it's been one of those things where I just kind of embraced the producer side of things a little bit more, tried to get better at that skill and really help people not only make their stuff sound good, but also make the parts work better and help with arranging and stuff like that. And I'm not a heavy-handed producer at all. I definitely just kind of feel like an extra member of the band or whatever. But with each project, that whole line gets blurry and it shifts. Sometimes some records I am just setting up microphones and getting sounds. But and then there's some records where I'm playing all the instruments and recording it. And then the person sings it. So it shifts from project to project, but I think that to separate myself, it's definitely been shifting more towards the production side of things and showing people what I can bring to their music as well as recording it. So I think that's been my biggest thing as far as getting a niche, if that's a thing,
Absolutely makes sense. Let me ask this question, because I work with producers occasionally. Most of the time, I'm the producer engineer. And that's because I am a producer. I mean, that's one of the roles that I love and feel like I excel at, is helping an artist or a band achieve a vision, maybe pull something out of them they don't even know is there. And that's one of my greatest joys. I love that. But let me ask this, because sometimes you're the engineer and you're just there to capture the sounds. Right. And you're not really there for the quote unquote creative input. Obviously you having a home studio, as I own my own recording studio, those two things lend themselves to having more freedom because people are working with you or they're working with me, not necessarily just our studio, but they're wanting to work with us, right? Right. So that lends itself to more freedom. They want your creative input most of the time. Do you find yourself working with other producers and other commercial facilities often, or do you ever do that? Or tell us about that.
Yeah, quite a bit. I love that, honestly. Like, I love working with producers where I can kind of be going and just make sure, the mic preamps are set. It's relaxing for me because I feel like when I'm producing an artist, I rush through the engineering side a little bit because I'm just trying to get the idea down or whatnot. So to just kind of like just be the engineer, I absolutely love that. And, usually if a producer hires me to engineer, they understand that I can be like a shoulder to kind of lean on as a producer and just say, and of course, by the end of it, they're asking for input and stuff like that. And I'm the same way. Like, even as I'm engineering, I'm making sure they like the sounds and I'm asking them what kind of sounds they want, so it just becomes, a team thing. And that's the kind of people I like to work with anyway. It's just like, if everybody's kind of creatively in and the egos are set aside, you're going to get the best of everybody. So, but yeah, I love working in other rooms. I love doing that. I don't get out as much as I'd like to, but I would say like maybe, 3-4 records a year I'll do at other places. It's a little more costly for people to do that, but I don't have a huge room. Sometimes if someone's looking for like a live band thing and they want a big room sound, it's like, okay, guys, well, we're going to have to go here, and we'll do basics for like a day or two. And then we'll cut rhythm tracks, and then I'll bring the hard drive back with me, and then we'll edit and fix everything and do vocals and maybe overdubs at my place. So kind of get the best of both worlds there too. So yeah.
That's exactly what I do.
Yeah, and it's nice that there's that flexibility there. And I have such a great relationship with a lot of studios in the state of Michigan. And there's some beautiful rooms here too. And there are a couple I really, really like the sound of the room. So I'm able to get them at a good price by just having me contact the studio and say, hey, I have this project coming in. And then I'm able to get the studio at a discounted rate as an incoming engineer. So that's super cool. So then the artist that I'm working with isn't paying full price for it either. So then that way I'm still able to charge my engineering fee and charge for the studio cost. And then it's not ridiculously priced.
Right. I find myself in my studio situation, I do a lot of the same thing, but my reasoning for, obviously, if you have a bigger room, it's going to have a slightly liver, larger sound. But in the Muscle Shoals area, there's a lot of big rooms that sound dead. They don't have a real live sound to them. They're just bigger. So you're not really changing the sound as much, other than you might have some room mics placed out further from the drum set or something, and it's just more room to be more comfortable. But my room works really well for me for a lot of what I do. And I rely, honestly, on plugins or something for a more live drum sound, even when I'm in one of the bigger studios here. I mean, there's a lot of great sounding rooms here that I've worked in quite a bit. Case in point, East Avalon Recorders, he's got a live chamber that sounds wonderful. His live room isn't really that live sounding, though, so we'll feed stuff to his plate or to his chamber and do it that way. As far as the tracking room itself, it's pretty controlled and dead sounding, and it's not a big, huge room, but it's comfortable. But yeah, I find myself doing that a lot too, and it works well for me because, like a lot of our friends in Nashville and other places, it's like I would love to have, a big live drum room and may at some point. I don't know what the future holds, but when there's so many great facilities that you can rent for a day or two and go do the thing and come back, it helps with the artist and band's budget. It's fun to go do something somewhere else.
Yep.
That's a thing I do all the time too.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, technology is so much more advanced than it even was 10 years ago. It's like, if I wanted like a big room drum sound, I had to go to a big room. But now I can, my room literally is about 250 square feet. So it's like the size of the Motown room, which is pretty small. So we get crammed in here.
They didn't get that good of a sound there,
Yeah. Well,
I mean, really, you make a good point, though. Motown, that was tiny. And how many hit records were made there?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's one thing, too, that I kind of invested in this last year is getting not nice. I just bought a couple of the newer Focusrite, like 8-channel interfaces and a laptop. And now I can kind of go do drums at like a theater here in Bay City or something, too. That's kind of fun. So I've kind of kind of set it up to where, and I didn't ever want to do that because I was just going to be always ticked off because I knew my rig at home would always sound better. And I'm like, let's just do drums here. Let's just do drums here because I had better pre's and stuff. But like, like the same thing with technology, it's like those $500 interfaces destroy the interfaces that came out like with the Digio 2 or the, all those things back in the day that were $1,300. They sound way better. So
case in point, that's a great idea. I may start doing some stuff like that. There's some really great sounding churches and theaters around here. I did a record for, it was a very, very, very lo-fi sound, kind of punk, rockabilly, skater punk, greaser type sounding music, but we recorded it 2 days in a t-shirt printing shop.
Oh, geez.
And it was cool. It was kind of like the Ramones almost. It was cool. I mean, it was not a good sounding room at all, but it was where the band wanted to record. So I have a Focusrite as well. I took that and did the thing, and it was cool. It turned out really well. I didn't even realize till after the fact when I got home and listened to it a few weeks later. And I was like, well, I accidentally did something cool. That kind of sounds a little bit like the Ramones.
Well, with everybody kind of having access to the same tools, it's up to us to be a little more creative in how we can make, if you listen to like a record from the late 60s or early 70s, it's like no two albums sounded the same. There wasn't like a staple rock drum sound, or there wasn't like a staple vocal sound or any of that stuff. The shit just all sounded different. And now things can sound so much alike because everybody's using the same samples. Everybody's using. I was
going to say that same thing. Everybody's using the same samples. And everybody's using the same plugin, and everybody's using the same preset by their favorite engineer.
Yeah. So what do you do? Oh, is that the cat?
Yep. Here, let me shut the door. Let me shut the door.
He's back.
I thought that there was going to be some behavior, but nope.
One second, guys. They do what they want when they want. So, but yeah, so I think that like it's up to us to kind of bring a little bit of that creativity to the band, so their record does sound like their own record, and whether that's going somewhere and doing horns at a weird place, or I feel like that's the fun part. So, and I'm such a, like, I wouldn't say I get bored easy, but I've used the same drum kit and probably haven't had the same drum sound on the same record twice in 10 years because I'll try different microphones or whatever I can do to make it their own. I like to do. So in today's world, that's a little bit harder just because everybody kind of has the same tools to their disposal, which is great though, too. You know what I mean? So it's just, what can you do creatively with those tools? Like Dan said earlier, that can kind of separate yourself from the herd,
Well, I kind of would have equated it to like you've got a paintbrush and let's just say red paint, and you've got a blank canvas. You've got the exact same tool if you're a painter, and anyone is going to do something, it's going to be different. So it's up to us to find new and creative ways to do that. As you said, are there ways that you have done that I know you and I are both equally huge fans of Sylvia Massey as an engineer. She's all the time doing recording in a cave or putting a microphone in a bucket of water or something and recording a trumpet or, random things, running wires through a potato and making them be a filter, all kinds of random stuff. Right. Are there any things like that? Maybe not that drastic, but are there things that you have done, places you've gone, the places you will go? I'm turning into Dr. Seuss over here.
When was the last time you recorded a potato? That's what we really want to know.
had a guy that looked like a potato. Does that
counts? That counts. Yeah, that's what we're here for. We're here for all of it.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying, though? Is
yeah.
No, there's some examples you could give of that, because that's a really, 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 really profound point.
Yeah, and I think that honestly, like also like to kind of before I answer it in a way, I think what it does, it creates such a sense of fun for the artist too. So you're creating an experience for them, and I always tell people that like I know you're at the end you're going to have this record, and that's the goal. But enjoy this time with your buddies and with your friends making the record, because that's the fun part. A lot of people just get so hung up on like the finished product. Enjoy the experience. You don't go golf to say you shot a 82. You go for the time with your friends. So I always try to like say enjoy the process. So in that sense, kind of writing off the page or doing something off script, I think people like really love that. It's like, oh man, what's going on here? That's super weird. Why would you do that? It's like, I don't know, maybe it'll sound cool, So, running drum mics through guitar pedals, stuff like that is always fun, and just trying to like sync the delay to like an analog delay to the tempo of the song, with like a memory man pedal is kind of cool. And then sometimes it's not in time and it's even cooler, stuff like that. I always just try to think about those things whenever we're in the middle of working on a track. It's like, what can we do here? And that's why I really like gadgets. I really like having keyboards, and I really like having tons of pedals and guitars and stuff like that, because there are still so many ways I haven't patched this in to get a sound. So even to kind of stimulate my own interest of like getting new sounds, I'll mix up my patching and stuff like that just for fun. I see what happens. So as far as like specific examples, I mean, there's always, just setting up, making a on the spot echo chamber in my tiled bathroom upstairs has been fun, where I'll put a loudspeaker up there and reamp a vocal. That kind of thing's fun. And it's just like, okay, I've never made an echo chamber, but let's make one upstairs right now. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So,
but that kind of creativity is, I can tell you, that's the kind of thing I want from somebody that's working on one of my projects. I want to know that you're creative, you're there for it, you're invested, and that's kind of awesome. Just impromptu echo chamber in the bathroom. Why not?
Yeah, it's it might end up sounding like crap, but it's like, but at least you tried it. But I think that's the part of it. Sylvia, like you said, is a great example of just doing such cool off the wall stuff, and just saying things like, if a guitar player is working on a cool guitar line, they're just not loving it or something, loving the way it sounds, just say, hey, you try that on a keyboard. Try that. Let's try that with like, what's the most ridiculous keyboard sound we can come up with right now? It's like, and then you try it, and sometimes the magic happens and it just hits the spot. So I think that like what Dan said too, if you kind of give this creative vibe from yourself, that opens up the artist to be more like that too. All of us know, because we're artists ourselves, it's so hard once we have an idea in our head about, okay, this is the way I want it. This is the way. So it's hard to think outside the box sometimes, especially when it's your own song. So if someone in the room is kind of projecting this creative element to it's like, let's try something weird, that lets the artist loosen up a little bit and say, okay, well, maybe I don't really have a firm idea here, and maybe their firm idea is right, but we can always get to that too, So, but I just feel like just kind of opening up the idea that everyone in the room can do something weird, even if like the drummer can't play guitar, let's have him play like a weird riff because it'll sound cool because he's not a guitar player. You know what I mean? So
that's like a really good point.
Yeah, I just think that, and it all goes back to the thing too of how can you obviously make the experience more enjoyable for the person, which is numero uno, because they're paying you to do a job, but also still give them a unique sounding album that only they could make.
Right. Well, anybody can get a laptop and plugins. Or, of course, okay, let me back up. You still have to learn how to use your tools and have a skill set, right? But yeah. I've found that it's like listening to me talk, listening to say all of this because this is stuff that I say all of the time. And I'll use the terminology. Look, I'm willing to, if it's a new client, even if it's someone I've worked with before, I'm like, look, I'm willing to take any and every dumb idea and throw spaghetti against the wall. And I don't get all in my feelings if you don't love my idea, because I will try something, put a mic in a trash can, throw one on the floor, take a 57 and, just do really just whatever. I love when I have a bigger studio where I have more channels. I will always take one or two channels and do something wrong to that channel.
Yeah.
I will put it out of phase. I will distort it. I'll mic the wall. I'll mic whatever the worst thing you can possibly do to that other than tearing up the equipment. I will mic that. And I'm like, what's the wrong thing that I can do here? And the reason behind that is 99.999% of the time, I'm going to push mute in the mix, and probably even during tracking because it sounds stupid. But what I find that does is, as you said, just to reiterate, it loosens up the artist or the band. Inevitably, in a band situation, you have the alphas, you have the one or two people who are in charge, and I immediately will reach to the person who you kind of get a feel for the room and be like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think we should do? And I will start the conversation with that person so that immediately pulls them in. I will do something, mic the floor or something, knowing I'm probably going to mute it in the mix. But what I find that does is everybody kind of lets their hair down, so to speak, and loosens up. And they're like, man, this guy's going to be willing to go down the rabbit hole with me. He's going to be willing to try things and not get married to it and all in the feelings about, man, we have to stay with this idea. Maybe it sucks, but maybe it's great too. And I'm of the mind, and I think you'll agree, that whenever you put more than one person, you put 2, 3, the more people you put in the room, someone's going to have a good idea at some point. And most of the time, it's probably not going to be me. But if I'm willing to throw the ideas out that we know were dumb, someone's going to they're going to feel free to throw their ideas out there.
Well, yeah. And what you're doing also is like, think about the vulnerability of like musicians when they come in to record. It's like, they're spilling their soul to you and you have to say, okay,
absolutely,
that's not good enough or whatever. It's like, but by you kind of almost making a mistake and saying, oh, well, I tried it. Sucks. Okay, let's move on. They're like, okay, cool. So now
I can try something and suck and move on.
Well, that's the thing too. They'll feel a little bit more comfortable too, making mistakes in front of you, but at least they're trying something to make mistakes. So, and that's a huge thing. It's like, people have to be comfortable around you because they're going to fail in front of you at their own song, So you have to be the type of person that's going to be like, okay, cool. Well, that wasn't bad, but I think you got a better one in you. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And it's like, we're cheerleaders, we got to be their number one fan. And I usually am, and that's just a fun thing. I would never set myself up to fail intentionally, but if I try something and I'll own it right away, it's like, oh man, that was not a good idea, like, and then everybody in the room laughs and they're like, okay, cool. Well, Andy's willing to mess up. Let's try some other stuff and see if we can mess up some more, because eventually one of those times something great's going to happen that they would not have tried if they weren't willing to fail,
Exactly.
You gotta be willing to fail to push yourself out there to try new things that you haven't, thought of. So, but like you said, you have to set the tone for that. They're not, especially, and you guys know this too. It's like, especially coming in for the first time. And I remember my first time in the studio, it's like, I was scared out of my mind and intimidated.
Oh, me too.
And it's like, I know my part. And then everybody's like, why don't you, then the producer's like, try something different. I'm like, what do you mean try something different? This is my part,
Right.
It's like, but
I didn't even know my part. I chose. And of course I was a kid in my defense. I was, probably 11, 12. I may have been younger. I don't know. And everybody's like, oh, it sounds wonderful. And I'm like, no. Doesn't sound wonderful. I'm going to go practice. That was bad. But I choked. And I'm always aware of that,
Yeah.
So I try to make sure that anyone's experience, it may be their only experience, it may be their first experience, maybe they had a bad experience somewhere else, but none of that really matters as much as I try to stay conscious of my first experience in the studio, of how overwhelmed I got. I mean, that's my sanctuary, and it's yours as well. It's our comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're more comfortable doing that than probably anything in the world. And most people are not. They're used to playing shows and getting an audience.
Right.
They're getting an immediate audience response. You don't get that really in the studio. You get, all right, let's do another take.
Yeah.
I mean, and that can be weird.
It can be very weird. Yeah. And the thing that, like, my first experience, I was in my early 20s, but it was when Brendan Benson still lived in Michigan. I don't know if you know who Brendan Benson is. He's in the Raconteurs. He's the other songwriter with Jack White. But he had an all analog setup at his house, and he's a tremendous solo artist. And he had released a record in '96, and it was one of my favorite albums. And I literally just called him because he was in the phone book in Detroit, because I knew he had a home studio. So my experience was with this guy who was already a hero of mine, and then add the studio on top of that for the first time. I mean, I was shaking like a leaf. But the cool thing with Brendan was, he was super laid back, super chill. He was able to make me relax. He was extremely creative. So he got me out of this, like, this is the way I wrote it, so that's the way it has to be mentality, like within the first 15 minutes, So I learned a lot from that moment, because if you make someone relax, it's going to open them up to be better. It's going to open them up to be more creative. It's going to make them perform better, all of those things. So, the home studio thing comes into play a lot in that regard too, because going into a $125 an hour studio, your artists are like, okay, we got to get rolling, and the vibe is a little more anxious than it normally is. But when you're at someone's house and they're, my dog's down here and we're just kind of chilling in the backyard and stuff like that, people are able to relax more. So I love that side of being in my home. So that's a huge bonus for sure.
Well, now let me reiterate that your home studio is a very nice home studio. It's not large, but I've not been there. Would love to come check it out at some point when the Rona's over. But the pictures I've seen of it, you've got a lot of great gear. I've listened to a lot of your work, and it's great. And you've got a very nice, what appears to be a comfortable setup. So it's not just some dude in a basement that's got a few pieces of gear and a mic set up with a drum kit. You've got one of the things you do really well is drum sounds. So
thanks, man.
And you wouldn't think that would necessarily be the case in a smaller room,
right. Yeah.
But that's one of the things I get a lot of compliments about is drum sounds. And I don't have a huge drum room. They're like, dude, did you record that at X Studio? And I'm like, yeah, right there,
Yeah.
It goes back to knowing what you're doing and knowing your gear and knowing your room, and you learn what works and what doesn't. But your studio is a really nice studio. It's not just a thrown together thing with the car in the garage and a microphone next to the trash can and the grill,
Yeah, well, it took some years to build. It took some years to build it up. I mean, but when I started, I had a Pro Tools LE set up with the Digio 2, and I also had like a
I did too.
8-track reel-to-reel half-inch machine, and I mean, I was doing more stuff on tape at first, and then just flying it into Pro Tools. So this whole transition, was
that just because you had more channels, or what you were used to?
I was just used to that, you know what I mean? Because every record I'd made as an artist from that point was on tape. So it's just like I was just used to that sound. And
I don't know what I was thinking, but I started a recording studio 11 years ago. It's May 2020 now when we're doing this recording. It was October 2008. I started a recording studio with a Pro Tools LE7 with an M box with two inputs and two $15 microphones. I don't even remember the brand. What possessed me to think I had something worthy of recording with? I don't know. But
I'd like to stop for just 1 second before you go any further with that thought, because I feel like that goes back to my original question about the people that that don't have studios and aren't equipped to have studios, I want to stress that I didn't mean that those things can't grow into studios. I just, and that's what I feel like Grant's saying here is here's how we started. And it sounds like you guys had really similar beginnings. So I don't mean to discourage anybody. I just mean
not
that,
at all.
No,
that
not
there has
taking
to
it
be
away at
growth
all.
before it's on that level. That's all I was trying to say. And
Well, I mean, I
I
did
don't
have
want
an
anyone-
audio. I did have a recording degree and had worked in really nice studios and was still doing things in nice studios. That's just what I had in my own personal thing. And I saved up for one really good mic, asked a lot of friend engineers. One in particular recommended a Rode NT2A. I was like, okay, I want to get one really good mic. I got about a $400 or $500 budget. What should I get? Okay, cool. Get that and get an SM57. Okay, done. And I put it on payments with Guitar Center, paid on it for like a year, was broke, but that's what I did. And that was I used those two mics on everything.
Yeah, you learn how to engineer that way too, though. It's like you can, if you have a minimalist setup, I feel like you develop a better, all of this gear that I have, it doesn't like make the record sound better if I had less gear. It's just easier for me to get there with this stuff. It just makes my
that's the same.
Easier.
Yeah, that's the same with my console. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, drum sounds in 5 minutes. Cool, let's roll.
Yeah,
You're getting closer to the finish line, and it makes our job easier. It's tools.
They're tools to make your workflow better and make the finished product get there quicker. You can get sounds easier. Even as this kind of, sorry, my dog's whining to go upstairs. My wife just got home, but as I transitioned and digital that early, just I don't know what it was. It just never sounded that great to me. But I also couldn't afford an HD system. So, I was doing so much stuff on tape. But, now with converters being awesome and just everything sounding really great on digital, I'm okay not working on tape anymore. I get the sounds that I like to get through my pre's and converters that I have. So it's like at the time, I'm jealous. I'm extremely jealous of kids starting now to be able to set up a rig for $500 and just have a decent mic, a decent interface, and a laptop. And it's like, and then you can plug it in and say, check 1, 2. And it's like, that sounds great, so.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Dan, you remember this back when we were in high school playing it. Well, dude, we may have been in middle school. We went to middle school, high school together. So,
Okay.
But anyway, hey, so we've known each other for years. But do you remember me having a Sony mini disc recorder with a stereo mic?
Hanging it from yes, I remember.
Hanging it from the ceiling fan.
I have trauma
positioning-
responses from that. I have trauma responses from that. I remember.
I would move, of course, the ceiling fan was stopped, of course, and I would move it around until it got the best sound of the whole band. And it was like recording of that. And before we had like a little 4-track or 8-track cassette tape recorder. I can't remember. It may have been, it's like a Fostex or Tascam or whatever. But the hanging a mic from the ceiling fan, I still to this day, I chuckle at that. But it worked for what we were doing. It sounded horrible, but I learned how to balance sounds with one little, it was a decent mic, actually, if I remember correctly, but I learned how to balance sounds just by moving the mic around. And it was like, I need to get this right here. And I don't have anything tall enough. I didn't have an extra mic stand to put it on. So I'm like, well, let's hang it here.
Right.
I don't think I've mentioned this. I found that recording a couple of years ago.
Oh, no.
No,
Burn it now.
It sounded better than it had any right to, given what it was. And that kind of makes me think about what Andy said a minute ago about, kids, throwing in $500 and having a setup now. And I'm not against that at all either. But I wonder to what extent having access to these tools, all these free plugins that are, or even affordable plugins, I wonder to what extent not having, to go through the struggle. I wonder to what extent that inhibits the ability for growth.
Well, I can speak into that. You can probably speak into this more because it sounds like you have a lot more analog tape experience than me. I've recorded on tape, but not, I don't think as much as you. I have a great respect and love for digital editing and crossfades after having to use a razor blade.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, Dan, and I think that
I agree.
Even like now, if I'm making like a solo album or something, or working with my band, The Legal Matters, I have to kind of set up some limitations because my brain will go crazy with the options, and I think that it's very important that you do set up those limitations. And I think that engineers coming up, try to get a good drum sound with 2 microphones. Just try it. And honestly, they'll probably get a better drum sound than using 6 mics because of phase issues. You know what I mean? But they watched a video that says, okay, put this here, put this here, put this here, and done. But,
well, I did that actually on the record I recorded in the t-shirt printing shop, because I only had my interface with 8 inputs. And I'm like, okay, we've got to record the Farfisa organ. We've got to record. They had 2 tambourine players. Anyway.
That's awesome.
What?
I had 2 tambourine players.
Yeah, I had a room mic. I had a SM7 for a vocal, and he had a 55 for a vocal sitting with the capsules close where they wouldn't phase out. But that 55 was running into a twin reverb, and I would mic it for a vocal sometimes.
Nice.
A kick mic covered in a blanket, and I had a mic under the ride cymbal over the rim by the beater pointed at the snare. And I don't think I had an overhead.
Right.
And it was really because the room didn't sound that good. And the record, it was a lo-fi thing. So I knew the more mics I put up, the more it was going to sound hi-fi, which would be wrong. I'm familiar with this artist and his previous work. So I had I knew what the guy wanted. So I had something to go on. Dude, I had 2 mics on that drum set, and it was cool. It worked.
Yeah. Less phase, man. I love using less mics. I mean, even I sometimes get better drum sounds that way. It's all about, like you said, what style of music. But, with what Dan was saying, I think that the really creative young kids, part of it, like you said, the limitations is cool. And I think that created like the type of producer engineer that like Grant and I are. But I feel like the kids that have all these tools and they don't know how to do stuff, so they try different things because they don't know the right way, are going to be doing innovative stuff as well. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point. Yeah. I haven't ever thought of it that way.
I look at like the Billie Eilish and Phineas thing. It's like, you don't have to be a fan to appreciate that those kids really worked hard at creating unique sounds for themselves. And he might, he even says he's not a recording engineer, but he just kind of worked and sculpted things to get to sound a certain way by pulling up a free distortion plugin and putting the snare drum through that just to see what it does. So I think it goes both ways, Dan. I really do. I think that there are some great things for the learning curve to really learn how to engineer. And then if you know the rules, it's easier to break the rules, but you got to be willing to break the rules. But with kids that don't know the rules, some of them might break the rules faster and create cool stuff. So I think it just depends on the individual. You know what I'm saying? I think that that's such a case by case thing. So, sometimes you get stuck, and gear inspires me now. So, I'm a plugin-aholic. So sometimes I have this list of plugins that I haven't used in a while, and I'll be like, I'm going to look at that list now. You know what I mean? Just for inspiration. So yeah, I think everything is it's such a unique point in time for music creators because of the access to the tools that they have. And of course, of every, 19 out of 20 are probably not going to be that great, but that 1 out of 20 is going to be pretty cool, and I think that, and honestly, if the other 19 are having a blast doing it, then that's what it's all about too. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, no, let them.
Yeah. So, but I think that there is some advantage to kind of not knowing what you're doing. I didn't know what I was doing early on. I didn't go to school. I had a music theory background, and I was a musician and a songwriter, so, and that goes back to the producer / engineer rather than engineer / producer. So I had to develop engineering skills, and I learned that by making records. That's how I learned, and I'm still learning. Of course, we're all still learning. But yeah, I think there's good and bad to that, Dan. I really do. I feel like that we're very lucky. Guys like Grant and I, we're very lucky to kind of have a little bit of a limited thing because growing up in that limited capacity, and making records on tape for me, I still love it, but I'm the first one that's super excited when we throw it into Pro Tools,
Right.
That way we can edit it and comp it after that. So yeah, it's such a great time for music creators. It really is. It's pretty awesome.
And you brought up another side of that. I guess I hadn't really thought about it, but I'm sure we've all worked with artists of some level or another that have been very rigid, that this is the way it has to be done because this is the way it's always been done. And
Right.
that doesn't get you anywhere either. So
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a really complex, it's an art, not a science. I keep saying that, but it feels like I've said that a lot in the past few weeks.
But sometimes too, those guys that have that clear-cut vision, the Jeff Lynnes of the world and stuff like that, they make amazing records too. So there's no right way to do it. But I saw that it was a great quote. I think it was J.J. Blair put this out there, and he's an LA guy. He's hilarious. He put, "There's no right way to record, but there's a lot of wrong ways to record." And I thought that was great,
This is making me, and maybe it's not quite the same thing, but just listening to what you guys have talked about in the past few minutes, I keep thinking about what Quentin Tarantino said one time. He was asked if he went to film school, and he said, "No, I went to films."
Yeah.
And,
I've never heard that. I love that.
Oh, it's, yeah. And if anybody was going to say something like that, and it carries some merit,
that's genius and brilliant.
Yeah.
You know what that makes me think of is Bruce Sweetian. Of course, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
I've heard him say he's a hero of mine for sure. I mean, for anybody who knows what he did, I mean, the guy recorded Chick Corea, Duke Ellington, Thriller for Michael Jackson, most of Michael Jackson's catalog.
So just a couple of little things here and there. No big deal.
Oh yeah. He's a small town guy. He might make it someday. But no, I mean, he's like, I think it was maybe it was a Full Sail video or something. It was on you. There's several videos of him on YouTube, and he's always saying, "Make mine music." What's your advice to young and aspiring music engineers? Go to a great sounding venue and listen to wonderful music.
Yeah.
Go listen to great music in a great sounding space. Then you know what music is supposed to sound like.
Right. Yeah.
And, it's kind of like experiencing a great film or a great play or going to an art exhibit and experiencing great art. And you know what that's supposed to be. And then again, there's the other side. You may not even having a clue can sometimes have its benefit. But I would say that's the few and far between. That's the people that they've got some sort of natural gift. It doesn't matter where you put them on this planet. They're going to do something wonderful. But for the rest of us, it's like,
well, they're still interested in sound. You know what
exactly,
I mean?
exactly.
The key. It's like you have your studios that, like, I got this mic, and that's what I was kind of told to buy, kind of thing. But then you have these people that might have less, but they know what to do with it more because they're interested in sound, and they're gonna dig. They're gonna dig a little more.
Exactly.
And those, even though they don't know, even though they might not know how to do everything, they're gonna dig. And I think that that's such an important part for anybody to have a longer career. And I mean, definitely still kind of, I consider myself having done this a while, and I'm in a decent place, and I've had some good longevity, but it's like I'm still digging, man. I still like am looking for every inch of how can I make this better? How can I learn? And I've been just, tape op from cover to cover. I've read every issue since it came out. You know, that kind of stuff. It's like, you know, even if you read an article from an engineer and one little thing sticks, that goes in your toolbox. You know what I mean? And
exactly.
And you gotta absorb all of that stuff and you apply it. And of course it's never gonna work. Dude, I've tried Andrew Shep's rear bus thing like 25 times, and it always sounds awful for me. And it's just like, it doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? And it's like, it just does not work. So, but you know, I tried it and it's cool. And I know that doesn't work for me. So it's like, I can kind of eliminate that out of my things to go for. And, you know, the experimentation, none of us are ever going to know everything about recording. Nobody's going to be the supreme master of recording. Well, maybe Al Schmidt, but
Al Schmidt is,
you know what I'm saying? Like, but so isn't that the thing for you, Grant, that keeps you going, is like, just that kind of like, something different is going to happen today and I'm going to learn something. And that's what really excites me about recording music every day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Dan, you could probably speak into that too. I think anybody that whatever their craft is that they do that they love.
Right.
I was loving where Andy was going with it. It's just, there's so much to be done and so much to do. And I think if you don't have that love for it, that not only is it not worth it, but you're not naturally going to get to the level where it becomes worth it.
Yeah. And it's just a paycheck then. You're just punching in and sitting at your cubicle and you going through the motions, you know?
Yeah, a recording console can become an office desk job at a cubicle, just like any other.
Yep.
Well, and
it can become an assembly line too. I mean, it can become the thing you hate.
I know Grant knows this about me, but Andy, I didn't go to college for music. I went for creative writing.
Oh, great.
And I specifically remember being told, and you know, later on, whenever I started seriously pursuing music, I would find out how true it was in every artistic pursuit. But I remember being told the only reason you should even consider doing this is if it's the only thing you can do. If it's the only thing that makes you even remotely happy, that's the only way that this will ever be worth it.
And let me ask you this, because I know you mean it this way, but I want our listeners to know that you don't mean it's the only thing you can physically do. You mean you have to do it. It's in your soul. You have to do. Not that you're incapable of doing other things.
But it has to come pouring out of you at all times. Right. Yeah. It's almost
like something's broken. Yeah, something's broken inside you if you don't.
Right. Yeah.